I want to ask you is, when I say the word change, what comes to mind?
Fear.
Fear. What do you think? Fear? Fear of change? What's that? Growth. Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of different thoughts that we have about change. Some of them are about what's possible, and some of them are about fear. Tony Robbins once said that change happens when the pain is greater than the gain. And Friedrich Nietzsche said that a man with a strong enough why can bear any how. So it's clear that whether or not we want to focus on the pain or what the why is, we're going to have very different outcomes, just like when we talked about what words came to mind when we talked about change. As mentioned earlier, my name is Stephen English. I'm an introvert coach, TEDx speaker, and workshop facilitator. This is the thing that I love to do. I love to speak, and I'm so glad to be here with you today. I'm really going to cover 3 areas in my presentation, and one is I'm going to tell you a story about that client that resulted in $40,000 in change. 2, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, a little bit about my background, and then 3, I want to give you some takeaways, things that you can use today that might shift your thinking in order so that you can achieve that change and that growth. So I want to tell you first of all about a guy named Paul. Paul and I met on LinkedIn. Paul had been out of work for 9 months. 9 months. He had been part of a layoff. This was all pre-COVID, before it became a seller's market in the job world. And he was incredibly frustrated. He had a lot of resentment because he was part of this massive layoff. And because of his challenges in getting work, he decided to hire a coach. So we met, and he decided to hire me. And as part of his culture, he wanted to give me the check face to face. So I met him, and we decided to turn that meeting into a coaching meeting, a coaching call. So I asked him about his process, and his numbers. So what were his numbers? How many jobs did he apply for? How many callbacks from human resources did he get? How many first interviews did he get? How many second interviews? How many offers? And it became abundantly clear that the problem for him was in the interview. So I asked him the most fundamental, foundational question ever. What's the number one question you get in any interview? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's another one?
Why do you want this job?
Why do you want this job? Tell me about yourself. Bingo, tell me about yourself. That is the number one. That's the first one everybody does. So I asked him, I said, here, why don't you go ahead and tell me about yourself? So he did. He took 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That was a giant red flag. So we got into understanding, what is the role again that you were looking for? Oh, he's a marketing role. So we looked at the role and responsibility, the skills and characteristics of somebody in a marketing role. And sure enough, the number one is great communication. Great communication is about being concise. Great communication is about holding the attention of the audience and the interviewer in this case. So after addressing this one thing in terms of his ability to hold the attention of the audience, it resulted in him receiving a $40,000 a year raise. So do I have your attention? Yes. Let me tell you, you might be wondering, well, who the heck are you to help anybody? How can you help anybody? What is it about you that makes you credible as a person who can transform people? Well, I myself have gone through my own transformations. I'm just going to tell you about 2 of them because I could probably go for about 2 hours on some of these. Number one is I was 311 pounds in high school. Doritos and Coca-Cola were my vice. That and computer modems. So I was original gangster nerd back in the day. And because I blew up to that level of 311 pounds, my self-confidence was very low, my self-esteem was very low, and I transformed myself in 4 years. I went from 311 pounds to 183 pounds by changing my habits and changing my lifestyle. So that was the first big transformation. And while on the outside, I looked different, on the inside, I was still that kid. So I had to work through my own self-confidence issues and build up to be an influence in an organization. And so then once I was successful on the outside, I still had some inner demons. And unfortunately, those inner demons caused me to do something called Drink. I drank lots of alcohol, ended up in Williamson County, Travis County for DWIs. Not something I'm proud of, but it's something that now, looking back on it, it was truly a gift because it gave me that pain. Remember I said, change happens when the pain is greater than the gain. It gave me that pain that showed me I needed to change. And so that was my next transformation, was recovering from alcoholism. And now today I can say I have 5 years of continuous sobriety. Now, thank you very much, I appreciate that. So let's go back to our friend Paul. So now that we have honed his 10-minute answers to interview questions down to 90 seconds, we now have him 2 days later, he's going into interviews. 2 days later, after paying me, after having the conversation about his interviewing skills, 2 days later we come to an opportunity where, guess what? He's about to get an offer. So he texts me and says, hey, I'm gonna get an offer, I think. I need to be able to answer what's my salary expectation. So we put on the calendar, I carve out 30 minutes for him, we get on the call, and we front load the value. So instead of saying, oh, I want $190,000 a year, we went and looked at what's the value proposition in that role? What's possible in that role for the company? And it turned out it was 20 times his annual salary. That's what the amount of value that he was gonna bring. And he front loaded that in the question, answering the question to the president of the company, and then they said yes. So he went from 150 grand a year to 190 grand a year, 30% bonus, stock options, all of the goodies. And that was a massive impact to him. I'm not saying that that result is typical with everybody. I'm not saying that that's all I do, but that's an example of how coaching changes lives in a very powerful and quick way. Now I want to give you 3 takeaways. I have no idea how much time I have. Oh, cool. I actually have a little bit of time. I want to give you 3 takeaways, things that you can, from this point, you can use in your own life. Things that I found were, for me, transformative. I don't know how many of you will admit to this, and so I will be the first one. I used to be a victim. I used to have a victim mentality. I used to think, why is this happening to me? So the first thing to change is to start taking radical responsibility. That doesn't mean that everything is your fault, but you are responsible for it. You are dealing with it right here in the right now. And so for me, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? I say, what is my part in this? What is my part in this? And once I can see my part in it, I can see my way through it. I can see my way through it. And as soon as I start to build up that agency, just like muscles are built up by going to the gym, when you can start to see agency and you take action, you start to build your self-confidence. And that's what I really, really needed. So number 1, start to take radical responsibility. Number 2 is something I call managing your inputs. So as a nerd that I have been in all my years, I used to look at inputs, process, output. And so inputs, manage your inputs. What does that look like and sound like? Not just the food that we put in our mouths, not just what we drink, but what do we hear? What do we listen to? What do we think? That's critical. So if, for example, you have a habit of getting up in the morning and watching the news, cut that out because it affects your energy, it affects your vibration. So what I do in the morning is I wake up and I listen to inspirational books, or I listen to speakers that I want to emulate, you know, and so I start with that. Also, watch the people that you have around you. Jim Rohn once said that we're the average of our 5 closest friends. So manage those inputs. And last, but certainly not least, procrastination often comes from us seeing something so big that we are stopped in our tracks. So start to chunking down. So look at a big goal and break it down into small manageable steps, and that'll make it easier for you to take that first action. So those 3 principles that I want you to take away from today is, number 1, radical responsibility. You really are in charge. You are the creator of your life. Number 2, manage those inputs. What you bring in, garbage out. And then number 3 is chunking. It's a way to take big, hairy ass goals, the BHAGs, and break them down into smaller steps. So I hope with these three things, you will be able to do something great in your life. And I'll finish with this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he said, our chief want in life is to have someone who will make us do what we can. And that sums up what a coach truly is. Thank you very much.